RMS Titanic, it's not just a sunken ship. It's a graveyard, a monument to technological arrogance, and the greatest maritime mystery of the century. 20-first. For more than 110 years, humanity has tried to reconstruct its final moments based on often contradictory testimonies from survivors and fragmented images obtained in the perpetual darkness of the abyss. However, between the years 2022 and 2023, an unprecedented milestone in underwater archaeology was achieved, an accomplishment that redefines historical research. It wasn't a recovery of gold, jewels, or tangible artifacts, but something infinitely more valuable: a sunken archive. Through a digital reconstruction in 3 dimensions of a magnitude never before seen, science has managed, metaphorically, to dry up the ocean, revealing that almost everything we thought we knew about the mechanics of the impact, the partitioning of the structure, and the final sinking process was incomplete, an oversimplification, or simply wrong. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. The discovery of the remains in 1985. The team led by oceanographer Robert Ballard initiated a crucial era of visual exploration and respect for the site. However, the physical limits of the environment were immense. The cameras on the submersibles could only capture what their powerful spotlights illuminated within a very limited radius of a few meters. The result was a massive visual puzzle, a collage where the entire ship could never be seen in a single unified shot. This fragmented view limited the overall understanding of the shipwreck scene. In 2022, the underwater mapping company Magellan Limited, in close collaboration with Atlantic Productions, designed and carried out the most ambitious photogrammetry expedition in archaeological history. Using state-of-the-art remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, named Romeo and Juliet, the team spent more than 200 actual working hours at the bottom of the sea at almost 4,000 meters deep. During this operational period, they captured the astonishing number of more than 700,000 high-resolution photographs from every imaginable angle, covering every inch of the wreck and the vast surrounding debris field. The precision required for this task was millimeter level, compensating for the turbidity of the water and the immense pressure. The processing of this vast amount of photographic data using advanced photogrammetry techniques generated a monumental archive of 16 terabytes. The result is the first digital twin of the Titanic, a full-scale virtual replica with unprecedented visual and dimensional fidelity. For the first time in history, historians, naval engineers, and forensic analysts can examine the wreck as if it were located in a dry dock, completely devoid of water. This digital archive allows us to observe details as minute as the exact serial number engraved on one of the propellers, the name engraved on a bronze bell, or the exact arrangement of the porcelain plates and bottles scattered on the seabed. But beyond mere visualization, this scan has provided the definitive physical and forensic evidence needed to debunk centuries-old myths and theories. Since that fateful night of 14 April 1912, the official and most popularized version maintained that the iceberg had ripped open the side of the ship with a continuous, clean and catastrophic wound of about 90 meters in length. This idea was cemented by films, the dramatic descriptions of early analyses, and above all by the simplified diagrams and textbooks. The new digital archive, however, tells a radically different technical and metallurgical story. By analyzing the hull, especially the starboard area that collided, under the weight of mud and rust using penetration scanning, the researchers discovered that there is no such giant hole or clean cut. Instead, the steel of the plate was subjected to such intense and sudden shear pressure that the iron rivets fractured or popped out of their housings, and the thick steel plates buckled, creating a series of surgical, intermittent, and multiple small cuts, which functioned as a series of punctures along the compartments. Many of these cuts are surprisingly small, some no larger than the size of an A4 sheet of paper or a hand. This discovery profoundly changes the narrative about the ship's design and fragility. The Titanic did not sink because its hull was inherently weak in terms of steel quality, but because the collision was geologically complex. The iceberg did not act like a saw knife that cuts, but like a pneumatic hammer with intermittent pressure that deformed and detached the metal in a localized manner. Furthermore, the scan corroborated a theory that experts used to dismiss due to a lack of evidence. Water also entered massively through portholes, circular windows, that were left open when struck or that broke due to the pressure of the impact. As the ship tilted, these glass circles became accelerated water inlet pipes that flooded compartments that, initially, had not suffered direct damage from the ice. Popular culture, especially thanks to the cinematography of the late 90s, showed us an almost clean and visually spectacular division of the ship. The ship split gracefully in half at the point of maximum tension. The stern dropped, rose majestically, and sank vertically. The scan in 3 dimensions have revealed that reality was infinitely more violent, chaotic, and rapid than had been imagined. The digital archive shows in forensic detail that the Titanic did not break at a single point. Rather, it torn and collapsed under the overwhelming weight of thousands of tons of water that were already flooding its interior. The middle section of the ship, just behind the funnels, was literally crushed, ground up and pulverized by hydrostatic forces and the weight of the bow. Digital scanning reveals luxurious cabins, ornate staircases, and service areas that were transformed into a shapeless jumble of twisted steel. The partition was not an elegant event of engineering failure, but a controlled explosion of internal pressure and unmanageable structural stress. The stern section, which sank to the bottom spinning erratically like an out-of-control propeller due to its asymmetrical shape, is so massively shattered and dismembered that scanning 3D is the only way scientists have been able to clearly understand which part of the shipwreck is which. While the bow maintains a tragic yet majestic appearance, the stern is a monument to absolute chaos, demonstrating that the dynamics of the sinking were far faster and more traumatic than the testimonies of the survivors, many of whom were in shock in distant lifeboats, could accurately describe. One of the most dramatic and debated moments in the survivors' accounts was the almost mythological claim that the Titanic remained illuminated until the very last moment, even when its bow was already completely submerged. Scientists and skeptics used to doubt this, arguing that the electrical system would have suffered massive short circuits and machinery failures from water ingress long before. However, the detailed 3-dimensional mapping of the machinery, electrical panels, and boilers in the digital archive strongly suggest that the electric generators, driven by steam turbines, continued to operate under extreme conditions. The scan shows the layout and relative integrity of the compartments where the engineers worked, confirming that the men in the engine room worked literally until the last second to maintain the steam pressure that powered the dynamos, by confirming that the lights were in fact on until the very moment of the final splitting of the hull. The digital archive grants a posthumous technical victory to the engineers and electricians who died so that others could have light and see the darkness as they boarded the lifeboats. This is no minor detail. It drastically changes the perception of the atmosphere of the tragedy, going from an absolute and paralyzing darkness to an artificially lit and chaotic nightmare scene. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. Over the decades, various expeditions have recovered thousands of objects, but the digital archive of 2023 has allowed for a virtual archaeological recovery without touching the ground. Among the most outstanding findings that now have a precise location on the digital map is the statue of Diana of the Hunt, a valuable bronze piece that once adorned the luxurious first-class lounge. This statue was briefly seen on an earlier expedition by Robert Ballard, but then disappeared under the effect of currents and sediment accumulation. The Scan 3D has located it again with pinpoint accuracy, giving researchers the ability to study it virtually. Alongside her, deeply personal objects have been identified: a necklace of black crystal beads, leather shoes preserved by the tannin in the skin, and champagne bottles that still have their corks intact in the sediment. The crucial importance of these objects on the digital map is that they allow historians and scientists to trace the cascade of debris. By knowing where each object landed and where it was deposited in relation to the ship and the direction of the fall, they can mathematically reconstruct how the ship's interior disintegrated and how its contents dispersed during its free fall 4 kilometers to the bottom of the sea. It is literally reconstructing a complex puzzle of Titanic proportions using reverse physics. Naval analyst and Titanic expert Park Stevenson has used the ultra-high-resolution data from this new archive to propose a revolutionary hypothesis that shakes the foundations of the naval history of the disaster. For a century, it has been believed that First Officer William Murdoch attempted to turn sharply to the left to avoid the iceberg and that the resulting side graze caused the damage. However, Stevenson, by meticulously observing the pattern of damage to the lower hull provided by the digital scan, suggests that the Titanic may have grounded or ridden face first on a submerged foot or protrusion of ice, a hidden extension of the base of the iceberg. Icebergs are like floating mountains, and their base can extend hundreds of meters outwards, just below the waterline. Stevenson proposes that the ship was mounted on this hidden ice platform. This would explain why the damage is so extensive on the bottom and bottom plates of the hull, and not just on the side. If this theory were to be confirmed by future simulations, the story of human error would shift its focus. Murdoch would not have grazed the iceberg due to a bad turn, but would have collided at high speed with an invisible barrier of ice that was just below the surface of the water, making any lateral turning maneuver useless from the start. The urgency behind the funding and execution of this pharaonic project lies in biology and chemistry. The Titanic is being inexorably devoured by bacteria Halomonas titanici, a life form that actively consumes the iron in the hull and creates fragile rust structures called rusticles, rust icicles. The ship is crumbling at an accelerated rate. The roof of Captain Smith's cabin has already completely disappeared, and the iconic bow railing, perhaps the most recognizable feature of the wreck, could collapse and disintegrate at any moment. This sunk archive is, therefore, a race won against time. The 16 terabytes of immutable data ensure that even if the iron of the wreck turns to dust and is dispersed by the deep currents of the North Atlantic, the Titanic will be immortalized in the digital realm with absolute precision. Scientists can now perform structural stress simulations, virtual metallurgical analyses, and accurate recreations of water flow and tension without jeopardizing the integrity of the physical wreck. The digital twin is the ship's final legacy. The discovery and creation of this digital archive in 3 dimensions have shown that history is never closed, even when the object of study lies under 4 kilometers of frozen water. We have learned that the impact was a series of small, high-pressure tears and not one large, continuous hole, that the splitting of the ship was a violent, chaotic, and crushing process that literally ripped apart the ship's structural core, and that the survivors' testimonies about the presence of the lights were in fact true, honoring the engineers. More importantly, this virtual museum allows us to reconnect with the human and individual aspect of the tragedy with chilling clarity. Seeing the statue of Diana, or a pair of leather shoes abandoned at the bottom of the sea through a perfect scan, reminds us that the Titanic is not just an engineering statistic, a diagram, or a Hollywood movie. It was a real event that affected and claimed the lives of thousands of people. The digital resurrection has not only given us cold, irrefutable scientific data, it has returned historical truth to us with unsurpassed fidelity, allowing us to say goodbye to the most famous ship in the world with a clarity and understanding that were previously impossible. The Titanic is physically fading away, but thanks to this monumental archive, its secrets have finally come to perpetual light. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.